Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
Some interesting stuff is going on around the NFL right now, right? We have the whole Kirk Cousins, will he, won't he situation with Cleveland, the rumors of the Browns deciding to skirt all of that drama and go with Russell Wilson instead. Then you look at the draft picture, you're hearing stuff that makes it seem like Cam Ward to the Tennessee Titans is pretty much a lock to happen. The pro day attendance from the Titans certainly points in that direction. Hey, everybody and their grandma in the Titans organization there at Cam Ward's pro day, at least for what we know right now. It's recording this video. The pro day hasn't happened. Just if you're asking, the Browns only had Glenn Cook, the assistant general manager, there at the Miami pro day. So seems like a lot of tea leaves are moving and shaking, and some of them aren't, right? We're hearing this news about Cam Ward definitely going one. There was a whole weird shenanigans with the Deion Sanders press conference thing about him hoping that New York is the move for Shador. I don't know how seriously to take that because it was from a press conference from like a week ago and it just now popped out. Seems suspicious to me. Doesn't seem like intel worthy of making any decisions off of or really reporting off of. I think, if anything, that quote could be an acknowledgement of where the draft really starts for the Sanders party. And if they think they have identified that maybe the Giants are the first team that'd be willing to take him, and they'll see where the draft goes from there, right? But anyways, right, that's the weird kind of murky picture of quarterback. But the one thing the Browns have done every offseason is make a trade for a wide receiver. And this year, so far, they have not made that trade for a wide receiver. Every year they've made a trade for a wide receiver, right? Going back to 2021, where they went for Amari Cooper. Or was that 2022? I'm tripping. 2022. 2021 was Elijah Moore. But they've brought in a wide receiver a year, basically, since Andrew Berry's got here. It's been their favorite way to acquire a wide receiver. So the question is, who's that guy going to be this year? The Browns have not been very active in the veteran wide receiver market, right? I pointed out that maybe Stephon Diggs makes more sense than we're willing to give it, especially if we're really committing to going after Kirk Cousins, which another side detail into that is that Kirk is not going to waive his no trade clause until after the draft. So I wonder if this is a situation where the Browns are operating under an assumption that, hey, if we don't go quarterback in the first round, we have this trade in place with Atlanta, and we're going to go and have Kirk Cousins by day 2 of the draft or by the end of the weekend. Wonder if that's factoring into how the Browns are operating right now, is that they might have a Kirk deal done. It's just it's not going to be processed until after the draft, where Kirk knows, hey, you didn't take a quarterback in the first round. I'm good. I'll come. Right. If you want to know more about that situation, I got a video dropping with my guy Trey Sean, who covers the Atlanta Falcons, and that should be dropping tomorrow morning. But anyways, let's jump back to the subject at hand. Right. The wide receiver trade. We're not really into the veteran market. We know that Andrew Berry, if he makes a big splash signing, right, it's going to happen in a trade. All of his big splashes have happened in trades. So this Brandon Aiyuk thing that's been floating around since pretty much last year fits the description of trades the Browns might make, right? If you remember last year, the Brandon Aiyuk situation basically went where Brandon wasn't willing to waive his no-trade clause for Cleveland in the deal that they were offering, or he wasn't willing to negotiate a new contract. My bad. He doesn't have a no-trade clause. He wasn't willing to negotiate a new contract with the Cleveland Browns if they traded for him, but the Browns were willing to give up a second and Amari Cooper for Brandon Aiyuk at the time. Pittsburgh was also willing. It seemed like he would be more receptive to doing that, but the 49ers ended up working out a deal with Brandon. I think it was a bluff that he even wanted. I think he didn't want to go anywhere. He just wanted the more money. But then the contract ended up not being what he wanted. The 49ers ended up not loving the contract. And because the 49ers have things on their docket immediately, like they have to extend Brock Purdy, they got to figure out what they want to do with a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, who might not fit their timeline anymore. And that puts Brandon Aiyuk back on the market. Now, there begs the question of, like, if you're the Browns, is Brandon Aiyuk something that you want to go after? What would be the right price for Brandon Aiyuk, right? It's not a no-brainer, close your eyes and do a decision for Cleveland. But, you know, there are some things that make this interesting for the Browns. Let's start with what the compensation is rumored to be, right? It's probably not going to be a second-round pick you have to give up. The draft pick compensation would likely be significantly less than what you have. Some people have pointed out, I believe Josina Anderson has alluded, that maybe Wyatt Teller might be involved in a deal for Brandon Aiyuk. But what seems obvious at this point is that the Browns are interested in trading for Brandon Aiyuk. I know some people have brought up that Aiyuk did not opt to go here the first time around. He didn't opt to go to Pittsburgh either, right? He ended up signing that deal with the 49ers. So he didn't opt to go to Pittsburgh. We know Pittsburgh re-upped and traded for a wide receiver in DK Metcalf this offseason, so they were still on the hunt. The Browns, you know, they're just because a player can't be moved to them now doesn't mean that they won't be interested later, and that situation might arise with Brandon Aiyuk. And Brandon Aiyuk, now that he has his contract, might be more receptive to different places to play, given that he doesn't have a say in the matter. So, you know, last time he had the leverage of saying, hey, I'm not going to renegotiate my deal with any team that trades for me. This year, he doesn't have that luxury. He's going to play wherever he's traded to. So that makes it a lot easier, a lot simpler for the Cleveland Browns, right? Because you're not trading for a player who needs a new contract. Maybe you renegotiate and add a couple $1 million to the deal to make him happy, but he doesn't need a completely reworked deal at this point. And the compensation for him is going to be significantly lower because he had the ACL injury the season prior and wasn't really playing particularly well before that ACL injury. But I think all of these things kind of wrap into one obvious point, which is Brandon Aiyuk spent the whole offseason in training camp arguing about a deal. So that probably led to him not looking great at the beginning of the season because he didn't have a full training camp behind him, you know, and not having a full training camp behind him probably led to him getting injured, right? So all of this stuff, this messy Brandon Aiyuk stuff, wraps into a bow where he's under a contract. Let me try to pull up the contract details on Over the Cap. But Brandon Aiyuk is under a contract that the 49ers do not want because they have to sign a quarterback, right? They have to sign Brock Purdy to a deal sooner than later. That makes Aiyuk's deal hard to stomach, and maybe they're willing to move off of him. Now, this is a huge maybe. This might be like last year where they play with the idea of trading him, but never ultimately pull the trigger. That seems to be something that they do. If you trade for Brandon Aiyuk, the cap number at least would be about $10.7 million in 2025, 2026, 16, and then the numbers get explosive after that, right? You're talking about 2027, $42 million, 44 in 2028. But let me see something. How much of this is a bonus and how much of this is guaranteed? So none of the money is actually guaranteed past 2025. So they would save some money cap-wise, San Francisco. The Browns would trade for a contract with no guaranteed money past 2026, which means you could basically throw out that 2027 year and that 2028 year unless Brandon Aiyuk's playing spectacularly. So the numbers make sense for Cleveland. The compensation is at a point to where it would make sense. If you're willing to trade a second-round pick for a 26-year-old wide receiver with no ACL tear, a 27-year-old wide receiver with one ACL tear, you're probably willing to give up a fourth. And I think that's fair value, maybe a fourth in a player right? If you use Amari Cooper's value, maybe it's a third that you're willing to give up without the player and a fourth in a player. Or maybe a fifth in the player, right? I think the draft compensation part is going to be pretty easy to figure out. It's more of a question of what player do you add into this deal? Do you want to give them Greg Newsome to make your cap situation a lot easier to deal with? Or do they want to take like Wyatt Teller, right? Because their offensive line does need some work there in San Francisco, or at least need some maintenance there. It's not like a horrible offensive line, but it does need maintenance. So maybe Wyatt could be part of the deal. Not really sure how those pieces will work out, but the rumors are that the Browns are looking at Brandon Aiyuk, and there's enough there to make me feel like that they're definitely talking to San Francisco. Will a deal get done? I don't know. San Francisco and Brandon Aiyuk both have been pretty flighty with this kind of stuff over the last few years. So, yeah, San Francisco's having conversations, but there's no guarantee that San Francisco actually stomachs up and trades him, especially after they traded Deebo Samuel. If they do trade Aiyuk, it's probably going to be after the draft, or so you're not talking about this year's pick, maybe next year's pick. Like, there's a lot of different variables in how this gets done. If you trade for Aiyuk, does Aiyuk want more money because he wasn't super happy with the deal that he signed in San Francisco? Does he want more cash? Are you willing to give him that cash up front if you're Cleveland? If you had concerns about paying $30 million for a wide receiver, you don't hit that cap number with Brandon Aiyuk while he has guaranteed money, but you're going to hit a high cash number with him. Are you willing to pay a lot of cash to keep Brandon Aiyuk, even though it's not going to go on the cap? There's a lot of different questions you have to answer, but if the Browns had Brandon Aiyuk, Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, all of a sudden this wide receiver room looks a lot more filled out than it was 3 days ago. So it wouldn't be a bad idea for Cleveland to see what's going on here. But right now, they're looking into Brandon Aiyuk. No guarantees on if they're actually going to pull the trigger on the Brandon Aiyuk trade. But it does seem like they're in talks of doing it, legitimate talks of making a move here. Remember, they signed Tevin Jenkins. We're all trying to figure out what's the math there on Tevin, because Tevin means that there's an odd man out somewhere on the offensive line for 2025, because Tevin Jenkins, legitimate starting caliber player, and could have signed multiple places that had better seasons in Cleveland last year that would have offered him a starting role. So he's here to play. He's not here to sit the bench, be a swing tackle. That's what Cornelius Lucas is for. So the Tevin Jenkins piece of this makes it interesting, because it's like, hey, Tevin's a guard. So if you trade Wyatt Teller, well, then you have Tevin Jenkins, and you don't have to worry about guard. And the plan still is to play DeJuan Jones at left tackle. Maybe you want to play Tevin Jenkins at left tackle, right? And you're not planning on trading Wyatt Teller, and it's more or less in the Greg Newsome territory that you're looking to ship off. Or maybe you're not even going to give up a player. Maybe you just give up a fourth and a fifth, or a future third and a fourth. We'll see what happens here with this move. But, just like how the Browns swooped around 3 years after hearing Jerry Jeudy rumors, feels like they have their targets set on Brandon Aiyuk. They feel like he'd be a tremendous fit for this offense. And when it comes to wide receiver trades, Andrew Berry's done a good job with them. So, if he thinks this would be worth whatever he trades for him, I kind of am inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt, given how well Jerry Jeudy worked out and how well the Amari Cooper trade worked out. But we'll see what happens down the line. But this is a update on that whole situation, an update on a lot of different things going on around the league. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.